Welcome to Homebrew 42's repeating crossbow tutorial. Okay, to start, you need a simple 2x4, and you could draw a pattern on it, like the shape of the stock, and the pattern doesn't really matter. And use the jigsaw to cut the pattern out. And then what you're going to do is to start the hole for the bow. You're going to pick a spot. I picked about 2 inches back from the front of the stock, and I drilled a hole through the stock, and then I used the jigsaw to cut out a square so I could slip the bow into it. The next part is the bow, which is 4 pieces of oak. Two pieces are 3 feet long. Another piece, third piece back is 3 feet long, and then the fourth piece back is a foot long. And so it adds some spring to it. And I used a bungee cord, so this isn't really exactly a crossbow. It's more of a slingshot, but it still looks like a crossbow at least. But to put the bungee cord in, I drilled holes through the first 2 pieces of wood on the bow, and I inserted the metal hooks through. For the butt of the stock, I used a 1x1 piece of wood, and I also cut a pattern onto that and used a jigsaw, so it has a slight arc to it, so it rests. And I used 2 screws, drilled those in to mount it, so it'd be sturdy. For the bow, mounting the bow, I slipped the bow in. I didn't glue it together, so everything is loose, but I used a screw to drill through the bow and into the stock, so it's in there pretty securely. Okay, now next on to the trigger mechanism and arrow slit thing. Okay, to start, you need a 1x1.5 piece of wood, is that thickness, and you're going to cut it to whatever length you need, which mine happens to be about half the length of the stock. And the most important part here is the part where the trigger goes. So the trigger is a bolt like this, but cut down with a metal saw to look like this. What you're going to do is you're going to need to cut a groove in the wood, just like this piece right here, just how it's cut like that, and so the trigger can go in and fit snugly just like that. So when the bowstring is locked back in here, it pushes the bowstring up onto this path where it can shoot the arrow out. And the next part here is the path for the arrow, which I used a router bit to carve, and so the arrow lays in that path and it doesn't roll out of the side of the crossbow. Now, also with the trigger mechanism, on the underside, you're going to need to glue a washer ring, so that the trigger bolt does not wear on the wood. That way it extends the life of the crossbow. And the final part is the hole drilled on the rear end so that you can insert the bolt for the crossbow. Okay, next is assembling the crossbow and making the crank. So what you're going to do is you're going to slip the trigger mechanism underneath the bow, and this thing right here is a stud protector plate that you nail onto a wall stud in a house, and that is also to extend the life of the crossbow by making it so when this trigger hits the stock of the crossbow, it doesn't wear a hole in it. So you're going to slip this underneath to about right there, and next comes the assembling of the stock, not the stock, the crank. So the crank is the same wood as the trigger mechanism is made out of, and it's about the same length. So it's just 3 of these pieces, cut to different sizes, all screwed together. So it's not very cool. how this thing works. So as you crank it up, the bowstring doesn't move, but the trigger mechanism moves forward and it locks in place. Then as you pull back, when the bottom of the trigger that protrudes through the bottom of the piece of wood, when it hits the metal plate, it pushes up and therefore pushes the bowstring up, causing it to shoot forward. Alright, next part is the magazine, which is pieces of plywood which I got at my craft store. 3 pieces glued together, and they are just about, when glued together, just about the width of the arrow, so it's pretty snug in there. Just a little bit of wiggle room. So when you put this on, I drilled a hole in the back of the piece of wood for the trigger mechanism, and drilled a hole through the plywood. So it slips on. I used the washer and another screw to mount that.
And a jumbo-sized screwdriver.
Yeah. And for the front of the magazine, I didn't screw it down because in case you need to take it off for maintenance reasons, you can, I used twine to rope it on. String it on. Same difference. What would you call it?
Just like the Knights of old.
Yeah, except they didn't have duct tape. Or bungee cords. Or Home Depot. Crossbow is assembled, so you're pretty much done with that. But to make it so it doesn't wear down after a few shots, you're going to use a bowstring wax to wax up the string to prevent it from fraying. Okay, onto the bolts. So, to clarify for everyone who's been telling me they don't have fins, yes, they don't have fins, and that's for a reason. If they had fins, they wouldn't be able to fit in the magazine. So, I have about 4 bolts, so I'm going to load them in the crossbow and then show you how it works.